Welcome to the Bridge the Series, a special edition of What Makes You Human podcast. I'm your host, Alhan Islam. At a time when our world feels divided by borders, by systems, by stories that don't always meet, this series is an attempt to build something different, a bridge between continents and cultures, between youth and policymakers, between what is imagined and what is possible. In today's episode, we explore that bridge through the lens of trade, tech, and trust. My guest is Leonardo Bolstad, a Japanese New Zealander engineer and policy advocate whose work sits at the intersection of clean energy, digital health, and diplomacy. Together, we will talk about what it means to engineer not just systems but solidarity, to use technology in the service of humanity, and to see how the next generation is redefining what collaboration looks like across borders. Hi, Leo.
Hi, Mariam. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for agreeing to do this with us or with me. um, I've always really admired the work that you do. I mean, the first time that we met and just finding out how much work you do and how much effort you put in the work that you do as a young person is so impressive. And you're someone that I really admire and I hold close to my heart. And it's such an honor to know you. So thank you so much for coming on this.
Thank you. That means so much to me, especially coming from you, Mariam.
So Leo, you're someone who have lived across Japan, France, and New Zealand. How has that global upbringing shaped your understanding of what it means to bridge worlds?
Well, thank you for the question. So yeah, I mean, like my every time I introduce myself, one of the first things that I say is that I'm a Japanese New Zealander who grew up with a French education and lived in France as well. So I love what you like the introduction of this series because for me, bridging worlds has never been something that's exotic. It's been something of my daily life. And I remember to the time where I first met you actually at the United Nations, it was all the wonderful friends that we made there. And you could feel that kind of concept of how international this world is. So for me, growing up between worlds is exactly that feeling that I had when meeting you and our friends at the United Nations, this feeling of how dynamic and how interconnected we are these days. So I think I was raised in, it was such a wonderful background, such an amazing background because my background kind of reflects this modern reality of the fact that we can't divide each other anymore and we need to work together, which is why I'm so glad to be working in engineering and international advocacy.
Thank you so much for that answer. And you spoke about
Mm,
working in international advocacy. I would love
yeah.
to hear how that has shaped your own reality and what that work means to you.
So in terms of how advocacy, like why I do what I do, would you say?
Yes.
I think I do what I do because I think I've seen throughout my time engaging in international advocacy that there's nobody else that will do it for us if we don't stand up for ourselves. I mean, one of the things that I find powerful as youth, and one of the reasons why I think youth need to be included in decision-making spaces is that we bring urgency, when you watch the TV, when you watch the news, especially now, like COP30 is happening right now in
Right.
Belém in Brazil, where global leaders are coming together to decide how we're going to make sure that we don't go over the 1.5 degree limit, which is going to determine if, some of the neighboring countries of where I live in New Zealand,
Right.
places like Niue, Palau, will be under the water in 50 years to come. And I think when the world talks about 2050 degrees, like 2050 targets, we youth live in the consequences. And for us, 2050 is not enough. 2030 is the goal. We don't have
Absolutely.
those institutional kind of memory. We just bring urgency. So I do what I do in youth advocacy because I understand, and I think youth understand the urgency. And yeah, that's what really motivates me.
Thank you so much for that.
Mm,
It's such a strong way to really wrap up that question because truly, yeah, we do
mm,
not have that time because to us the
mm,
next 30 years it's still us still perhaps still being young people and we living it and maybe some generation, is already winding up for them. So it's like you're
yeah.
doing things that's going to make us live with the consequence. Thank you so much for that. Um, I think that when we talk about like the future of collaboration, we would agree
Mm,
that it doesn't just depend on trade, but on trust. Now, how do you
yes.
think that technology can help build or reinforce the trust between regions like Africa, Europe, and the Pacific?
Well, I think I like that question because mixing technology and trust is something that I feel in my field in engineering we don't talk about too much.
Hmm,
I mean, um, like in one of the things that I study is humanitarian engineering.
right,
And in humanitarian engineering, one of the very first things that we mention, and this is something that's important in youth advocacy as well, is co-creation.
right.
It's not parachuting down problems. I
Mm,
mean, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but one of the first things we taught is in humanitarian engineering is that 20 to 30% of water sanitation projects in sub-Saharan Africa actually don't work because they were forced on communities.
mm,
And when you don't talk to communities of why the problem exists and how you can solve them together, then nobody adopts it. There's this famous example of this well in one of these villages in sub-Saharan Africa that these, like people with good intentions, but they brought a well because the only water source was kilometers away from the village. And nobody adopted it. Why? Because the women who were the ones who went and got the water, actually for them, this journey to the well was the only time that they could get away from the men, the very oppressive view of men, and so they could just communicate, and that was a moment that they could share together. But when
right.
you don't communicate with the people using them, you don't understand that some
No.
problems actually are not problems.
Right, that's very true. I totally
Mm,
agree with you. I think, yes, a lot of times there's the savior mentality where you feel
mm,
you know better because you feel like your lifestyle is what is the solution or that's what salvation looks like. And you bring it
mm,
here. And to us, it's like, oh, this has to do with something else. We're not suffering.
mm,
It's like, can we then like co-create as you said? It's so
mm.
important. Thank you so much for raising that point. So I'm just gonna move to the next question. You have represented youth voices on global stages from the UN to COP29. What do you think young people uniquely bring to conversations about sustainability and digital transformation?
Well, kind of like what I said earlier, I think one of the strengths of youth, and it's often said as one of our weaknesses, but I really think of it as a strength, is that we don't have institutional memory. Now, that's often used against us because they think, like people who have experience say that we don't have the experience, necessary to engage with massive bodies like the UN or things that happen at places like COP, like I mentioned earlier. But I think that means that we're less loyal to the status quo.
Mm,
We
right.
won't give up as much. So I think, yeah, again, like bringing that urgency is one of the things that I
Okay.
think youth uniquely bring, but also the lived experiences. Like when you spend a whole career in negotiation rooms, and I've engaged with people like that, and these amazing people, but you kind of forget the urgency back home. You forget how maybe growing up nowadays compared to 50 years ago is completely different.
It
I
is.
mean, recently I was in Canberra for a climate conference that brought youth from Australia, the Pacific, and New Zealand together to talk about these issues. And it was amazing to hear, very saddening to hear about people telling me how in the past 10 years, their homes that they used to dine in, now they dine sometimes with water going up to their knees.
Oh, wow.
Those are things that were not the case 50 years ago. So I think these lived experiences, this urgency is what youth can really bring to the table.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for
Mm,
that. And I think that young people need to hear what you just said because I think there's all
mm,
this imposter syndrome that sometimes comes with being in those rooms, where you're actually feeling like, do I even belong here? I don't know a lot of things. I don't even know much about history, but it's like the fact that the history already exists, it's like, okay, what can you bring
Mm,
of your own self, of your own reality through the room? So thank you
mm,
so much for emphasizing on that. There's often a gap between what youth advocate for and what policymakers
mm.
deliver. And I think from your experience, clearly you would know that. But what bridges have you seen in that space that actually work in closing that gap?
Specific bridges, I would say. Well, I have had the privilege to represent my region, Australia, New Zealand, and the rest of the Pacific, to this organization called the Digital Transformations for Health Lab for the past year.
Right.
And I would, for any organization that's very interested in engaging youth in a non-tokenistic matter, I would definitely recommend looking at how we do things at the DTH lab, we're called, where any choice that's made or any new decision or anything that involves, like a research paper that we want to do, we first engage with the youth. We have youth representatives. And that's one key thing that I would recommend. It doesn't need to be it doesn't need to be complicated. It just needs to be making sure that youth not only have an opportunity to share their thoughts, but also to set the agenda. I think way too often when we have youth come to the table, it's always we set the agenda, yes or no. But there's so much power in letting the youth say, is there anything else that you would like to bring up that we can help with? I think
Right.
it's that lending hand. And that just that single act has so much effect on how youth not only interact, but also think about themselves. Because when they see somebody higher up than them reaching out a hand, like imagine all the benefits on the long term and how they will engage with younger people when they are in the seats that really matter.
That is so powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Um, yeah, I think definitely the willingness to even like allow us to actually support in that manner.
Mm,
Yeah, that's very important. Thank you so much, Leo. Leo, you're studying both electrical and humanitarian engineering. What
yeah,
drew you to combine these two worlds and how do they inform each other?
I think for me, there's this natural bridge
Mm,
between engineering and humanitarian work. So
mm,
I don't really see them as something that I bridge, but I think as something that should be bridged naturally more often and I think it should be something like humanitarian work should be part of any engineering degree.
mm.
Why? Because I think engineering is the application of science for humanitarian ends. Science is, the research of our natural world and how it actually functions. But I think engineering has a very special place because you use that knowledge and you say, how can I help my community? I mean, even my phone, it's engineering. Why? Because you have a community problem, you have an issue, or you see an opportunity, and you use science to bridge that. So for me, it's such a natural thing, and um, I think it executes in a very natural manner. Like I study electrical engineering, so I think how can I introduce solar panels into communities, especially ones that are not connected to electricity, you know?
Right. That is
Mm,
that's powerful. Thank you so much for bringing that to the
mm,
forefront, because I think
mm.
oftentimes we don't see that connection. So you making that connection is so important for the people out there to also hear and understand. Thank you so much. In the climate energy, you've represented
Mm.
your country, your region in climate conferences. So in the climate energy transition, what role do you see empathy and storytelling play alongside data and technology?
I really like that question actually because it is very true, like um you engineers, scientists often just bring up facts, but what really moves the world are stories, like ones that you share and that you tell. And I don't think we have a technology yet. I mean, just to give you an example,
Right.
I think there's this massive organization called IRENA that says if we cover the Sahara with solar panels, we can have 7 times the global energy demand for energy.
Mm.
So it's not a technology gap we have. We already have the technology. We could, light on every light in every kid's home. I think the problem that we currently have is an empathy gap. We have all this technology, but we're not using it. And I think this is exactly where storytelling and especially empathy come in. Storytelling reduces the distance between data and decisions.
Mm.
And I think that's why stories are so powerful. And it just gives us empathy to use what we already have and solve the issues for the world.
Before the
Mm,
last question, you spoke about bridge. You used bridge a lot in your word, which is really
mm.
incredible because the series is called the Bridge series. So I want to ask you, when you hear the word bridge, what comes to mind? Is it like an image, a memory, or a philosophy?
Again, I really like that question because it connects back to the first question that you asked me about, how growing up across France, Japan, and New Zealand, vastly different countries and cultures, languages, how has that affected me? And I think that's affected how I see the word bridge, I would say. Because I see a bridge as not really a thing. I see it more as I would say like actually a choice, more than anything. Because when you think of it, like the bridge may be a thing, but you choose to cross it. It's a crossing to another side. And so again, coming back to all the languages and the cultures that I grew up in, I think of bridges maybe not as a translation, not a language, but a translation of assumptions, if that makes sense.
Mm.
I I really think, like one of the benefits again of growing up across the world, across languages, and having so many friends like you who are just, from completely different places than me, it's that you translate these assumptions, these kind of ideas that you have on on people, on languages, on other things. So I think of a bridge as an action, a choice to go to the other side and to meet people and understand them and to break down those assumptions, which kind of makes the world a more connected place.
Thank you so much for that question. Now, back to what the name of the podcast in itself is, which is
Mm,
what makes you human. I want to
yeah.
pose that question to you, Leo. What makes you human? We know Leo, the climate activist. We know Leo, the diplomat. But what makes you human?
Well, I mean, it's very simple, but it's people like you, just people, just conversations, just bridging these ideas. I feel like that's what makes me human. I mean, we humans are very different from some other species of animals because we are a social animal. And I really feel that when I'm having conversations like these, I feel so human. So yeah, it's just people.
Thank you so much, Leo. And the last question, what is that message that you have for young people out there?
I think putting yourself out there. And this is one thing that I love telling people back home, throughout my free homes, but you don't need to be in New York. You don't need to be in Paris. You don't need to be in Geneva to be a youth advocate. You don't need to, be in these decision-making tables. Like the UN is just a massive building with offices everywhere. It's not where things happen. I would say start where you are and continue where you are and finish where you are. You don't look at LinkedIn, don't look at Instagram and think that's what you need to do to make an impact. You need to realize that the real change is made right in front of you, not on your screens. So that's the key message that I'll give.
Thank you so much, Leo. It's been such an honor to have you on this podcast. Thank you so much for giving us your time, your knowledge, your wisdom. I truly appreciate it, and I'm sure our audience would appreciate this. Thank you, Leo.
Thank you so much, Mariam.